Great buzz in the room.
All right, I see.
Missed the last momentary pause, but we'll get started here at the tap and hopefully get you out of here a bit early today.
Oh, boy. Famous last
Yeah, that's never happened.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
That's the word. Everybody shut up.
Pressure on you. Delay a meeting pretty well.
All right, so let's call the meeting of the tap to order. It's the State Advisory Board advising the Met Council. It is August 21, 2024,
I'm between.
and it is 12:36 p.m. And do we have any members of the public that wish to address the tab on any matters of concern to them that aren't on the agenda or scheduled for a future meeting, scheduled for a future public meeting? Okay. Chair's report. We'll go to reports now. Our exec committee met today, and we just went over the agenda and talked about potential future topics. So that is my report, very brief. I don't want to be redundant to what we're going to be doing here from a work standpoint, so I'll keep it crisp and short. And then we've got Connie Sahibjam here from MnDOT for his report.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Hovland. A couple of things. We just had a groundbreaking down in on Highway 212. And last week, or a couple of weeks ago, and Councilmember Barber was there. One of the speakers. There was many policymakers there, elected officials. It reminded me that this is the last piece from. I have a reason why I'm talking about this. From Cologne to Norwood Young America, going back when I was in this job years ago, early 2000s, about 25 years ago, let's say, we planned on Highway 212 from Eden Prairie all the way to Norwood Young America, and it was based on mostly requests from outstate Minnesota, from the western side of the state and South Dakota even, because it's a heavily truck route. As I was standing there during the groundbreaking, and it was right by the highway in the church parking lot. Huge trucks go by. Seems like it was, and I heard somebody on my staff said there was like 20% truck traffic, which is a lot. You know, 1 every 5 vehicles, it's a truck. So, and back then I remember we parked, and I was in the Metro District, and then at the time, the commissioners, you know, we created a bond program to get that project going. And some of the outstate bonds, whenever there's bonds from the legislature, we have to split it half and half Metro, half outstate. That's just how it's divided. And but we got more for that from the outstate part of the world. And I've often talked about the 169-494 project, where we had supporters from the Mankato area for that project. So that reminded me of that whole thing, that it took us 25 years to finally get the whole thing going and done. And then the next part of it is the partnership, and for that I'm wearing the Minnesota's County Engineers Association pin today. I felt like, in the spirit of partnership, they are, Carver County in this case, they're the ones who are delivering that. They delivered the piece from Carver to Cologne, which is done. Now they're going to be delivering, you know, we're going to do construction administration, but they did all the design and basically putting up their own money, county dollars, and going after federal dollars. And we chipped in at MnDOT, of course, but, and so that's kind of a new thing for us, where the local agencies are interested in investing in the trunk highway for purposes of commerce and increasing their tax base and having people move to their counties, which is great. And we do that for with most counties in the metro area. So I see that as a good thing. It's a disruption to our regular planned, you know, our planners have you know, they know what they want to do. All of a sudden the county comes, or a city, you know, they have this, they go get this pot of money, and then to go through the legislature, boom, you get a bunch of money to deliver something, which was not planned. But it's an opportunity. So I just wanted to mentioned that, how long it takes to do that and how a partnership can be a big part of delivering that. Kind of related to that is, as we were trying to plan for winter and winter maintenance, just to give you some numbers, within the Metro District, we have up until 3 years ago, 440 maintenance workers. These are the guys who summertimes they fix things, and then in the wintertime they plow snow. And for every big major snow event that we have, we send out about 216 or so, we used to, trucks at one time. I bring that up because the number of people that we have has gone down over the last 4 years. Not to scare anybody or anything, but I think it's going to be very difficult, where we were down to like 330 now. And I know our guys, they work hard. I was in our Oakdale shop last night till about 9:30, talking to those guys and how we can try to keep the level of service going and the expectations that there is in the metro area, the heart of the economic part of the state, the expectations how highways need to be cleared and safe for the traveling public. So it's we got a break last year, as you know. We hardly had any snow, and we were able to save that money. Although our guys were not happy because they didn't get overtime pay, but we were able to update some of our equipment, our snow plows and things like that. But it's something we'll stay in touch. I'm sure through the media you'll hear things, but I plan on being on top of it, and there's reasons why there's less people working in that area for us, but that's not for now to discuss. Quick, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to talk about some now safety numbers. I usually haven't done that, but I wanted to do it today because I get many of you probably get daily reports of number of fatalities that we have in the state. And I get that, and I think every day, unless I missed one day, that it goes up, that there's a new fatality, and they explain it, where it happened and how it happened, not too much detail. And this morning, 2 days ago, I got one, and I use those numbers to present here today and mention those numbers and make a point. But this morning, when I opened that email, it was like somebody gave me the world. It was the same number as the last 2 days. We haven't had any more fatalities, 271. That's statewide fatalities. 271, unfortunately, that's from the beginning of the year, but that's about 40 more than last year that we had. And it seems to want to go up and down. It really spiked in 21, you remember, because speeds went up, and of course distracted driving. But it was 234 last year. At this time today, 271. So it's trending upward. So I think it's important to keep that in front of us. Of the 271, I'll just throw these numbers out. Pedestrian fatality was 23 of those. Motorcycle, 43. I didn't say that to my wife because I want to buy a motorcycle. She won't let me. She says if you want to run air through the holes in your head, get a convertible, is what she says. So. 43 motorcycles, bicycles 4, ATVs 17, and snowmobiles 1. I suppose because we hardly had any snow. But so anyway, I wanted to bring that up, and we just had our exec meeting, and looks like we're going to have sometime in the future, Mr. Chair, big conversation about safety and what are we going to do about these to make a difference rather than just talk about it. So thank you.
Cause anyone to have any questions for Connie?
Mr. Chair, just
Yes,
a quick,
Commissioner.
ATVs on the roads or ATVs in general? Do they have to be on the road to be considered?
Well, That's a good question. I
Yeah,
don't know.
it is.
But is it considered a motorized vehicle, so they would be
Yeah.
counted as?
Well, I'm just asking if it's all ATV fatalities or if it's only
But there are usually-
fatalities on the roadways.
They're off the road though, right?
That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
I would say that'd be all, because snowmobiles, they're not necessary, but they could be crossing the
Could be
road, yeah.
crossing a road,
You don't
too.
know. I don't know.
It's on or along the highway system is what I would say. I mean, we had 13 people die when the bridge collapsed, but that 13 was added to the traffic fatality. It wasn't a traffic fatality, it was some other reason, but it was on or along a highway system.
Yes, I mean, I'm just curious if
Right.
it's a teenager that hits a tree
Yeah.
a mile off the road, is that accounted in those
I can-
stats or not?
Or he's driving in the ditch next to the highway and something.
I'll find out.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Member Sahib. And now we've got Member Bewin with us today. Todd Bewin is here from MPCA. And anything, Member Bewin, to report to the tab?
Well, you know how, Chair Havlin, I scour the agency before I come over to see if there's anything related to transportation that I can share. Found a couple things, a little tangential, but one is that we were not here last month. Since we were here last, MPCA did receive a $200 million grant from the US EPA through their Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. So we made application for that and received it, which is really exciting. It focuses on food systems and decarbonizing our food systems in Minnesota. The one thing that is connected to transportation is $20 million that will go to the Department of Ag and to MPCA to focus on agricultural equipment and in our food delivery systems and things in Minnesota. MPCA will be administering grants for decarbonizing our food transportation systems and food equipment systems, and the Department of Ag will be helping with that. So that's one thing. More to come on that. We'll be rolling that out. It's a 5-year program, so we'll be putting a lot of money into Minnesota over the next 5 years. And the second thing is that the Climate Action Framework has been in place for a few years in Minnesota, and we're going to be updating that. We're forming advisory groups to hear from people and recruiting individuals to contribute their perspectives, their lived experiences, their technical knowledge. And one of those advisory groups is on clean transportation. So we have an application period open, and people are invited to come and join us in those work groups. So information on that is on our website. I can get that to Elaine, and we can get that into the notes for how people, if they're interested in learning more about the Climate Action Framework update, they can do that. That's all I've got.
All right, thank you. Interesting, though. Thank you, though it was short. Questions for Member Bewin? All right, thank you. Carl Crimmins, our MAC rep, couldn't be with us today, but he did send in a written report, and I can quickly cover that. The FAA is planning a 2025 update to the procedures airplanes use to navigate as they depart MSP Airport. I think many of us in cities that aren't too distant from the airport have been aware of this. And so they hosted two virtual public meetings on August 14th and 15th to share more information and gather community input on the proposed updates from the FAA on how they intend to control airplane traffic out of the airport. The MAC and the Noise Oversight Committee, the NOC, have been working with FAA to ensure that information is shared with surrounding communities about the proposed updates to flight procedures. As we all know, the FAA is the sole authority over where and how aircraft fly, fully managing and implementing the planned update to the departure flight procedures anticipated to be finalized in February 2025, going into effect in August of 2025. Members of the community can provide public comments on the proposed procedures. For more information, it's available on the FAA website, and I'll give this information to Elaine. She can post it up and send it to everyone. Community engagement-Minneapolis-St. Paul, Federal Aviation Administration. We'll get that to you. And then he also had a couple comments about the Riverview streetcar plan, which is a Ramsey County project.
Yes, it is.
They're a little bit anxious at the airport about it. They see it as a $1 billion cost for the project. That may not be new news to you. The Riverview streetcar plan as it stands today could limit access to the airport. That's what they're concerned about. Bus rapid transit would be more affordable and should not affect airport access. Ramsey County may have a different view on this, and I'll have to work that out with them. And then as of now, they said there was no plan to subsidize business owners on the Riverview route for disruption if the Riverview streetcar plan is built. So, Commissioner, welcome. First we say welcome back.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's so exciting to be back. For those of you that don't know, I spent many years on TAB, and I'm excited to be back. I'm going to be taking Trista Martinson, my colleague, who's moved on to our Recycling and Energy Board, and so I'm excited to be back as the main member. So looking forward to this work. And on the streetcar issue, we are having a workshop that is open to the public next Tuesday is it in the morning? Yes, it's in the morning at 10:30 or directly after our board meeting. So we're going to get a lot of these questions answered, a lot of details. There's been a lot of conversation around this streetcar and a lot of public debate. And we have a lot of, I think, questions that we all continue to have on whether it's the best thing to do. But I think we have a lot of people that are very interested in keeping it a streetcar. So we'll see. I'm looking forward to the workshop because we're all going to learn a lot more of where we're at with that. So
I think you were here for 8 years before.
I think so. I know it was. It was a long time. So
And
it's good to be back.
just a little bit of compliment going her direction. She just finished a year as president of the National Association of Counties of NACO, which is quite a
Which is-
prestigious job that you have to get elected to, not appointed to. So
Yep, thanks to
did a great
people,
job.
thanks to people around this table who helped me
Proud-
help
yeah.
with that. So all the commissioners in the state were very instrumental in helping with that.
good. That's
Team
great.
effort.
Okay. All right. And then on to Deb Barber, our Met Council rep. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of our biggest responsibilities at council is to create the Regional Development Guide every 10 years. Our latest guide, Imagine 2050, was released for public comment on August 15th, and that includes the overall plan, but also includes the system plans like Transportation Policy Plan, which you're all very familiar with and got a good preview of, the Land Use Plan, Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan, Water Policy Plan, and Housing Policy Plan. The comment period is open until October 7th. I will say that, especially with the Regional Development Guide, it's still a draft. So there is good opportunity to comment. I know I have some comments. So I would hope that all of you will take an opportunity to comment. You can comment either on individual policies or on the full overarching Regional Development Guide. There are links through our webpage that take you to the comment, the pathways to be able to comment directly there, but we'll take it in whatever.
Deb, could I have you pause for just a second? Peter, you have to leave, I think.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
So
sir.
you had a couple of things you wanted to mention as before you left. So Deb, if you can just pause for a moment. I see you getting up ready to leave, so we want to make sure you get a chance
I have
to
a family thing that just came up.
participate in this part of the conversation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to, first of all, compliment.
Pull your microphone over a bit, please.
I wanted to first compliment Mayor Stephenson for, I had a client who had a grand opening of a restaurant in Maple Grove, and Mark made the time to come over in person, created quite a hullabaloo, and the owners were so impressed. So thank you, Mayor, very much appreciated. And I also, as I did at the Transportation Committee meeting last month, I wanted to acknowledge Metro Transit, because so much we do is Metro Transit. And on the way to the Pride Festival, guess who lost their wallet on the Blue Line? Okay, but lo and behold, I filed a report. I get a call the following Monday from a supervisor. He didn't give me his name. He wouldn't give me his name because he said, I'm not supposed to be doing this, but we have your wallet and I'm going to send it to the Lost and Found. I said, this is unbelievable. You know, I know he's a manager of one of the Blue Line systems. I'm not sure which one. So I didn't read the instructions. They're only open certain hours. Well, I didn't know that, duh. So I show up and it's closed. So I get on the phone and a person gets on and said, we don't have it. It really worked hard. I spent about 5 minutes looking for it. We don't have it.
Oh, no.
Half hour later, I get a call from another manager. We have it. Okay, and then, then what happens is, I gotta show you. I said, well, I'll come down again. He said, don't bother. We'll mail it to you. So I get a Metro Transit by the end of the week, cost them $5 to send out a cheap wallet, which did have money in it, but it went to somebody else's groceries. Let me just put it that way. But, I mean, at least that's what my wife and I hope. Anyway, that's so amazing. People in manager calling me at home. I'm getting, who's calling me at 6:30 in the morning? I wonder who that is. And, and then sending it to me. I'm like, wow, this is pretty good. So anyway, compliments to all of Metro Transit people.
Right.
And of course, Chair Barber, you are well aware of that. I mean, yes. Anyway, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that quick report out, and good luck with your meeting.
Yes, thank you.
And Member Barber, back to you. Thanks for your patience here.
Not a problem. Thank you, Mr.
Why
Chairman.
he throws a compliment your direction.
I'm not going to argue that. I'll take it. Yeah. As you know, it's been a busy summer here in the Twin Cities with lots of events. Coming up on Saturday, August 24th, the Twins, Lynx, United, and Saints each host home games, and Zach Bryan will be performing at US Bank Stadium, and an open streets event will be held at Lyndale. So I'm quite sure our transit system will be quite busy, but I will tell you, I think things have been going really, really well for all of these big events. And Member Hanson, you can thank MBTA for me for the lovely ride to the Green Day concert this last weekend. My son and I thoroughly enjoyed having someone else take us. We are also, on August 17th, light rail service was improved now with our frequency down to 12 minutes. So, which is an incremental step. We're still working towards getting back to our 10, but this is closer, which means we're having good luck with our hiring of our operators and all of that. We're on track with where we want to be for the light rail system, which is very, very important. And then last of all, State Fair service. We have State Fair locations in Maple Grove, Maplewood, Minnetonka, Bloomington, and Cottage Grove. And we will be providing service starting at 8 a.m. every 30 minutes, $6 cash or $5 if you choose to do it through the app or online.
Good. Any questions for Member Barber?
I have a question,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. Good to see you, Member Barber again. When there's routes to the games and everything, sometimes I see free train rides and everything. These aren't all free, right? People are paying for most of these routes. Because
no.
I think it's great for people to get used to being on transit. And
Yeah, usually anytime there's free rides, it's actually sponsored by some company. So you'll see some things like on New Year's or St. Patrick's Day, and those are sponsored rides. So because we still have to charge a fare by our state statute.
Okay, thanks. Just curious.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr.
Our
Chair.
colleague Gary.
Mr. Chair, sorry, I have
Oh,
a
sorry,
quick
yes,
question for
Commissioner, go
Member
ahead.
Barber. So is the National Sports Center not going to host transit to the State Fair this year?
I don't believe so. Unless it's private, 95th. Yeah, unless I don't know if it was previously Metro Transit or if it was a private service that did it there.
I thought it was Metro Transit, but, okay.
We'll find out.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, with the rate of hiring new operators, when does Metro Transit expect to be up to 10-minute frequencies on light rail?
Like I said, we're very happy that we're down to 12, and it's all going to depend both on not only the hiring of operators, but there's a lot of behind-the-scenes maintenance and cleaning and lots of other positions that need to be filled to go along with that. We'll be tracking it very closely. Coming up later this fall, we'll be releasing what's called Network Now, which is sort of our expanded service plan, and maybe we'll be at a point where we'll be able to have an understanding when we can get to 10 minutes and when that makes the most sense to do that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Any follow-on, Member Wagenfeld? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Commissioner.
I have another question because one of my colleagues, Rena Moran, Commissioner Moran, had a hearing, well attended, over 100 people on the stations, the Green Line stations along University, because there's issues with safety and activity that's going on around the stations. And it was a great meeting, a lot of levels of government, a lot of partners, everybody in the space really having a great conversation. So I know the Metro Transit was there. So thank you for helping work with us on these community meetings that we're having now around the Green Line, because we all want it to be safe and we want it to be used. And so whatever we can do to help with that, I know we're on board with that. So just a question then, how are the ambassadors, how's the ambassador program working? And because we all want that to work.
So I think, first of all, I very much appreciate participating in some of those meetings. We've been doing that, and we've been going out and trying to be out in community as much as possible, because we know that it's Metro Transit has a role in all of this, but it's also other issues like mental health or addiction or things that are hurting some of these people in community that we're not necessarily the right organization to be involved with. So we like having these collaborative meetings where people from different backgrounds and different community groups can be together, because to understand or to fix the problem, you have to actually fully understand the problem. So, because it's not all just a transit issue. I would say that this tiered approach that we've been using, where you've got everything from cops and CSOs to trip agents, which are the ambassadors or the trip agents. We've also got the TSIP program, which is a program that partnered with community organizations to be out. We've got security guards on very different platforms throughout the system. And having this sort of layered approach has been very, very helpful. I think just having more people and more presence out in the system, it just gives people both they're unlikely to, or less likely to engage in bad behavior, but also we have somebody there to respond if somebody is. And also we've been able to use these trip personnel and actually building in fare inspection, which has been a challenge for us because we did have such a limited number of police that was not really what we needed people to be doing at that particular time. So having these other people out there, I think, has been very helpful. We're still looking to get it fully staffed up, just like a lot of organizations. But we're definitely making progress.
Thank you. That's a great program.
All right. Our Suburban Transit Authority rep is with us, one of our colleagues, Gary Hansen, and we'll turn to him for his report.
Overall, suburban transit providers' ridership continues to increase. I mentioned last month, and as Member Barber can attest, special services are a component of that. State Fair service has been mentioned, and after a 3-year absence, Maple Grove Transit State Fair bus service is returning on weekends and Labor Day from the Maple Grove Transit Station. Minnesota Valley Transit Authority has received delivery of 5 electric vehicles, the first in MVTA's fleet. These vehicles will operate primarily as part of Connect microtransit service and are expected to go into service during the 4th quarter of this year. MVT again is offering service to the Renaissance Festival throughout the entirety of the festival and to all 12 days of the Minnesota State Fair. And also Southwest Transit is offering State Fair and Renaissance Festival service except on Labor Day. That is my report.
Good. Questions for Gary? All right. How about your microtransit business? Has that continued to increase? I mean, Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that you've been pretty proud of.
Driving ridership, yes.
And describe that microtransit business again, the equipment they use and the model of business.
These are the smaller buses. These are, I would guess the 15 to 20 capacity minibuses. And these are ride on demand. And very inexpensive. For example, in Eagan, you can go anywhere in Eagan for $3, and people find that very convenient. We're also seeing that our senior citizen ridership has become quite dependent upon that service, and so we're pleased to be able to provide that.
Okay, good. Thanks, Member Hansen. Jenny Hager, our TAC chair, isn't with us this month. Joe Barbeau, our staffer, our ACE staffer, anything you report out on the TAC meeting at all, on the TAC report basis?
Thanks, Chair. No, the 2 items we'll be talking about in consent were brought up at that meeting, along with a presentation on the TIP public comments, which you'll be hearing about, and the presentation you'll also be hearing after actions are complete.
All right, good. Thanks for that. Next up is the approval of the minutes for July 17, 2024.
Winchell moves.
Second.
All right. We got a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the meeting of July 17, 2024. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the minutes of July 17, 2024 as drafted, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Minutes are approved. And then, Mr. Barbeau, you want to come back up? We're going to have you walk us through these consent agenda items. We probably provide a little bit more information on these than you'd normally see with a consent agenda, but I think it's important for people to understand what the projects entail. So let's start with 2024-35.
Thank you, Chair. 2024-35 is an amendment to decrease the length and increase the cost, a minor, very minor cost increase that wouldn't be a TIP amendment in and of itself, for the Minnesota 47 or University Avenue improvements in Fridley and Blaine. And this is, you'll see two columns on the sheet highlighting the amendment, and that's because it's the same project, the two funding sources. One is STP and one is HSIP. So I'll clarify that those are programs you've heard about plenty, but these are not coming through our solicitations. These are from pots that are directly programmed by MnDOT. And the rationale for this happening is that the project was going to span 8 miles, but it's being shortened in length to 3 miles from Mississippi Street and Fridley to University Avenue Northeast and Blaine. And the rationale is is because some of the projects on the part being removed are not projects, improvements on the part being moved, were not really able to fit into the street in terms of not reducing transit stations and transit stops and things like that. And then the 3 intersections really being focused on Mississippi, 85th, and University, Highway 47 and University, are pursuing bigger fixes. 85th in particular has had a lot of collisions involving pedestrians. And for that reason, MnDOT's requesting that, that this amendment be approved. And then I can move on to the next one since it's consent.
Let's see if anybody has any questions for you quickly on 2024-35. Okay, let's cover the other one too.
Okay, and the next one.
Handle them both on a single motion.
Yep. And the next one, number 36, is a $75,000, is a new project, $75,000 of HSIP funding through something called Section 164, which is Federal Repeat Offender Law. And this funding is going to video recording and analytics and for a pilot project for pedestrian and bike users on Robert Street. And it will fund up to 30 cameras for 48 hours to track movements and counts for pedestrians and bicyclists as a way to inform on some of the data to collect in the future on that. So $75,000 of HSIP funding, but again, not HSIP through our solicitation. With that, I'd stand for questions, and we're well covered today by MnDOT for this and for the next item.
All right. Anybody have any questions relative to either 2024-35 or 2024-36? Is there a motion to approve?
Winchell seconds.
All right, we got a motion. Commissioner
Anderson.
Commissioner Anderson, and then Mayor Winchell, second. All right, we got a motion and a second to approve those two items on the consent agenda in a single motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Those items are approved, 2024, 35, and 36. Thank you. And then, Mr. Barbeau, on to 2024-27, which is a business item for us.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the approval or the recommended approval of the TIP to the council along with the acceptance of the public comments, of public comment report, I should say. So you had a brief presentation on this when you released it for public comment in May. I'll go over it quickly. Stop me if I gloss over something. The TIP is a 4-year list of transportation projects funded in whole or in part with federal funding. Any project with federal funding needs to be in the TIP. Also, any project that is regionally significant. It's fairly rare that a project would not have federal funding and be regionally significant and be in the TIP, but that actually is occurring this time around for the first time since I've been here. It's a large project in Scott County that's entirely funded without federal funds. All MPOs are required.
I think you should also tell us, we'd like to hear you say how much money is involved.
I'll get there.
Yeah, $6 billion, isn't it?
$6 billion, yeah, that's on a future slide.
Makes us feel good that we
Well-
got 6 billion in the pipeline.
We don't usually have a difficult time approving this amount of money, so. It's required of all MPOs to have a TIP, and then it's incorporated into the Minnesota STIP and statewide transportation improvement program, and any project to receive federal funding must be in the STIP. The STIP reflects our TIP, dollar for dollar, project for project. So here's our schedule of the TIP. We're on the red line today, where we're hoping to approve the TIP or recommend approval of the TIP to the council. The council will approve it in mid-September, and then MnDOT includes it in the STIP. And federal approvals, it says November, December. That's kind of older information. It's usually closer to November 1st, so that's a little pessimistic on that slide. So about November 1st, and then at that point, the 2025 to 2028 TIP will become the active TIP. And as requested, here is the summary of funding, $6.2 billion overall. Federal highway and federal transit, of course, take up a big share of that, although local and property tax and state taxes take up more, or a plurality of the funds per these 4 bullets anyway, along with some state trunk highway funds. And you can see on the pie chart, to no surprise, highway and transit projects make up the lion's share of the TIP, along with some set-asides and other types of projects, and bike ped-only projects there in the bottom take up about 3.7%. So every year we put this out for a 45-day public comment period. The number of comments we get range from 5 to 200 over the last decade or so. We had 94 commenters provide a total of 98 comments this year. Most of them are written, but we also have a virtual public meeting once a year, and have been doing that since COVID in 2020, and had 3 comments that were recorded and included from that meeting. And so we have some themes, or some items that came up multiple times. In this first one, we had 71 comments suggesting that the bridges on I-94 within the Rethinking I-94 project area should be reconsidered. There was a little bit of concern that, well, there's a chance that this project, or that this quarter might be changing, or could these projects even inform the decision? We shared this comment with MnDOT, and I don't know if everybody's got the handout that they produced. So they produced that handout, and it's valuable to keep in mind that whatever the decision is on Rethinking 94, it's gonna be a long time before any shovels are put in the ground on that. In the meantime, we have some bridges in questionable condition. Some more themes. We had a few commenters express opposition to any change of 94 through the Rethinking project. That's not really germane to this TIP, but those will be passed on to MnDOT. We had a few commenters on Highway 280 and Broadway that didn't like the idea of closing the left turn from 280 northbound to Broadway, suggesting that maybe that could increase speed, or maybe even the speed limit. Again, that's a little out of the purview of the TIP, the speed limit is, but they also did express concern with the project. And we had 4 commenters on the Highway 252 project. This was the primary topic of conversation last year during this public comment period, and they cited community opposition and shortfalls related to meeting TPP and Hennepin County goals, in that they don't meet all the goals. And then we had some non-project specific comments that we get every year related to greenhouse gas emissions, and some folks that had preferences to more bike or ped projects, or more transit projects, or more highway projects. And those kind of comments don't really impact the TIP directly, but they do impact some of the things that we do going forward as we hear from folks. No direct changes are made to the TIP because of these comments, but they do continue to inform what we're doing. So with that, I would remind you that what we're asking of you is acceptance of the public comments and recommendation of approval of the 2025 to 2028 TIP itself. And we have MnDOT on hand if there's any questions about any of these specific projects that are mentioned here in the public comment report.
All right, was there any member of the tab that had a question about the TIP comments about the I-94 bridges? We did go over this in exec and got a thorough explanation from both member Sahibjam and Molly McCartney from Planning and Programming at MnDOT, who's with us today as well, if we need to have her visit with it. But I think the handout was very helpful in terms of being able to explain that it was really about repair and then in some cases replacement, all due to safety reasons. So anybody have any questions about it? All right. Is there a motion to adopt 2024-27, which is adopting the public comment report, and then the recommended adoption of the 2025 through 2028 Transportation Improvement Program to the Met Council?
Second, Geisler.
All right, we've got a motion and a second, Member Morass, Member Geisler. And any further discussion on 2024-27? All those in favor of adoption of 2024-27 as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 2024-27 is adopted. The public comment report is received, and the tip recommendation from the tab will be forwarded to the Met Council.
Thanks, Chair.
All right, very good. Now we're going to get into the information. Thank you, Mr. Barbo. We're going to get into the information portion of the agenda, and we've had some discussion in the past, and in fact, some of our work on the regional solicitation involved a bit more emphasis on safety. And so we've had staff working on that, and we're here to hear from Heidi Schallberg, and I think you'll introduce who's with you to talk about the Regional Safety Action Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Heidi Schallberg. I'm a planning analyst here in MTS. I'm the council project manager for the Regional Safety Action Plan. So this project builds on work that we started a couple of years ago doing a pedestrian safety focused action plan. We've been working with a consultant team that we'll introduce on this plan. And then also just wanted to mention that we are working with MnDOT to bring them to some of your near-term meetings to also do some additional presentations from the work that they're doing on safety. With that, I will turn it over to Renee Keel, who is our project manager with SRF Consulting, to start the presentation and introduce the others.
All right. Thank you, Heidi. Like Heidi said, I'm Renee Keel from SRF. I'm a director. I'm a traffic safety engineer with SRF, and I've been working on safety plans for many years. So I'm leading this project with our team. I have two team members here who will come up in just a moment. Nicole and Jessica, I'll have them introduce themselves when they get up here. And I'm going to start off by setting the stage on the work that we've been doing for this plan, and then these two are going to get into the details of the work we've been doing. Am I able to advance the slides here? This one? Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay. So our work is to develop a regional safety action plan for the Met Council. The focus is on vehicle crashes and bicycle vehicle crashes with an emphasis on fatalities and serious injury crashes, because these are the life-changing crashes that we want to try to eliminate. Our team is made up of SRF with Alta Planning, Safe Streets Research, and Ismith Engineering. And this project has been overseen by a technical advisory panel, which has been made up of representatives from local, state, and federal partners. The goal of this study is to address the requirements of the Safe Streets for All program, which I'll get into in just a minute. And like Heidi said, we began this work in May of 2023, and will be finalized by the end of this year. So if you're not familiar with the SS4A program, this is a program from the US DOT that has put out $5 billion across the nation to improve safety. It started in 2022. It's a 5-year program, so we have 2 more years left of funding in 2025 and 2026 that agencies can use to apply for funding for a number of items. The goal is to promote safety, employ low-cost, high-impact strategies to improve safety, and make sure that we're making an equitable investment across our systems. The funding opportunities that exist come in 3 categories. One is supplemental activities. So our plan is going to identify challenging areas across the network, and agencies within the community are able to then apply for funding to do supplemental activities such as a corridor study or a safe routes to school study or a speed study, something that looks at what the issues are at those particular locations. They can also apply for money to do their own action plan. So this action plan we're working on covers the whole council area, but one city might want to do a plan specific to their area. So that's another option as well. Demonstration projects are another option. So if you're not familiar with this, this is where you would go out and set up a temporary change in your roadway. Like maybe say you're going to close a left turn lane, you would block it off with bollards and see how that would operate if you maybe convert that to a pedestrian median for pedestrians. And then the last one is implementation. So actually building some of these strategies. If you want to build bike lanes or ped facilities, there's funding available to build those facilities. So those are all through the US DOT's Safe Streets for All program. So as we're writing this plan, we want to make sure that it is, meets all the requirements of the SS4A program, so our agencies are set up to be successful in applying for additional funding. So there are a number of items that need to be addressed, and we're making sure that we take care of those as part of our plan. This is a list of all of the items that we are going through as part of our plan. I won't get into all the details here since our team's going to be going through those in detail here in a moment. But just know that we're making sure that we're checking all the boxes for the requirements of the program. I'll start off with public engagement. We have Zan Associates as part of our team working on the engagement piece. Public engagement is a very important piece as part of the SS4A program. They want to make sure we're hearing from the public on what their challenges are and what their concerns are. And so at the beginning of this project, we sent out a survey to agencies within the council region to see if they had done safety engagement on their own, and we collected that information. And then from there, we were able to identify locations that had not been addressed, and we did further engagement opportunities here just earlier in this summer. From there, I'm going to pass it off to Nicole and Jessica.
Thanks, Ms. Gill.
Okay, so I get the chance to talk to you all about our crash data analysis and what some of the preliminary results are. My name's Nicole Bitson, and I'm with SRF Consulting as well. I've been there for over 7 years now and working on various safety action plans throughout Minnesota, Wisconsin, everywhere. So I'm excited to talk to you all. So our crash data looks at 2018 and 2022 crashes. We look specifically within Met Council boundaries. It included motor vehicle, motorcycle, and bicycle crashes. Pedestrian wasn't included because there was the pedestrian safety action plan. So we use that as a resource throughout and document in that information as well. Some of the key themes that we had looked at, so they're separated by mode, but some of the noteworthy that approximately half of all crashes took place at intersections within the Met Council. Approximately 3/4 of all crashes had speeding listed as a contributing factor. Motorcycles were also found to be most likely to be severely injured or killed if in a crash. And then also cyclists were also more likely to be severely injured or killed as well. So not surprising crash themes that we're seeing within Met Council, but something to be noted. We also provided some additional graphs as well, just to go through some of the crash data that we had seen. And here what's important to note is you'll see serious injuries on the left-hand side, noted by the blue bars. The black line there are non-serious injury crashes. And not surprising, we're seeing that automobile crashes are the highest within Met Council. But what's important to note is that in the motorcycle specifically is that we're seeing that higher crash rate, so that looking at non-serious to serious ratio, where we're seeing again that if motorcyclists are to be in a crash, we're seeing those fatal and serious injuries. Crashes by county, this we looked at totals by county. You'll see that Wright and Sherburne are fewer than the rest, and that's just because we look specifically at the Met Council boundary. So it's only those that are counted within Met Council specifically. Not surprising that we saw, again, Hennepin, Anoka, and Ramsey, Dakota. Those are the higher fatalities and serious injury crashes throughout. But again, when we looked at serious injuries per 100,000 residents to try to normalize and look at these all at a level playing field, we saw instead that the rate was highest with Anoka, Carver, and Dakota specifically. And one of the things too that we wanted to normalize is that looking at crash data just by itself, it's really important to look at all those different layers and continue down and peel the layers of crash data specifically, so not to look at it at face value. We also looked at crashes by a functional class, and again, we're seeing, not surprising, that minor arterials, principal arterials, and interstate have the highest fatal and severe injury crashes. It's very similar when we looked at the crashes by 1,000 roadway miles specifically. The only difference was the minor arterial and principal arterial. Those rates were a little bit different. So what all the...
Oh. Excuse me, Member Geisler.
Just a question, for the Wright and Sherburne, the per 100,000, is that the population just in the urbanized area as well? Or is that the entire county but you only looked at crashes in the urbanized area?
It would be the entire county, I believe, is what we looked at.
So they're probably artificially depressed, relatively speaking. Okay, thank you.
Okay. And then, so one of the main points that we wanted to talk through is that there's a large report that'll be an appendices to the safety action plan that will include all of the crash data that'll be available for you all to use and source as information. So I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to talk to you about high injury streets.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm Jessica Schoner, co-owner and data science lead for Safe Streets Research and Consulting. Also, in a previous job, I did work on that pedestrian safety action plan. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 different network screening exercises that we did for safety for bicyclists, motorcyclists, and motorists. I can also loosely speak to some of those pedestrian trends that we found a couple years ago, if you're curious. I'll start with our high injury streets identification. This is an analysis that looks at where crashes have previously happened in the past 5 years. And it's a little more nuanced than like a hotspot analysis, where do I just have a ton of crashes all happening at once? We're looking at what's the concentration per mile of those fatal and serious injury crashes all along the network. Where do I have them happening in sequence along a corridor? Where are they kind of spatially clustered? We look at these by mode. For modes that have just lower numbers overall and proportionately higher severity outcomes, so pedestrians, bicyclists, motorcyclists, we also do pull in minor injury crashes. There's a lot of reasons that the line between an injury A and injury B crash can be a little fuzzy sometimes and miscategorized. We weight them less. So we're still prioritizing fatal and serious injury crashes, but we're using modern best practices for addressing small numbers in the data. After we go through and measure these crash densities all throughout the network, then we pick a threshold. If that density is above the threshold, the street is classified as a high injury street. If it's below a threshold, it's not. This is for our historic analysis, which has been overlaid with more systemic and proactive analyses. So this is like one piece of the picture. This table shows what we're capturing with the thresholds that were recommended for this project. We used a data-driven approach, and we found that pedestrian crashes are so heavily concentrated in those urban center communities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, St. Louis Park, and a few others. We used different thresholds for urban center and then the rest of the region. For all the other modes, there's just one threshold for the region. So we got a score of 5 for the bike mode on any street in the region. That's on a high injury street. We're capturing about 31% of the region's fatal and serious injury crashes on less than 2% of the network. So if you want to start addressing where crashes are happening right now, where those life-altering crashes are happening, it's that 2% of the network. So pretty impactful finding, and we can look at these on a map. This and 2 other analyses have been loaded into a web map. I'm not sure if it's fully public yet, but it will be. But you can see there's a lot in the principal cities. There's some all around the region. You can probably see some state-owned facilities popping out. The trends that we saw here are consistent with safety trends we see everywhere. Arterials are a problem for all road users, and crashes tend to cluster on a pretty small proportion of high exposure, high risk streets.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
It's-
Commissioner.
You obviously don't have the entire metropolitan area on this slide, so, I mean, it's, for those of us that go beyond the edges in a presentation, it'd be nice to be included, but at the very least, if you could send out an attachment or whatever in the future so that we can actually see the whole metropolitan area on the map would be appreciated.
Do you know the timeline for the map?
The map will be available at the end. So when the project is completed at the end of the year is when we'll make that all public.
Well, Mr. Chair, even if it's stamped draft, you're presenting here to a number of policymakers that represent areas far beyond what you show in your presentation. And I just don't think that that's fair to those of us that represent those areas. And you can see lines that are literally to the edges. So I can't even tell how far down into, I mean, I don't think Lakeville shows up there at all on your map. And I'm guessing part of Anoka County and Washington County aren't on your map.
Correct.
we'll review and send out and see what our options are.
Member Linda, did you have?
I was just curious if any streets in Lakeville are high injury streets, for example.
It's been a while since I've looked at the actual map, so I can't speak to that directly in the moment, I'm sorry. But I think we should be able to export like a PDF by county or something just for, screw.
The crash rate analysis maps are more comprehensive and do include as far down as Shakopee, and Lakeville is there as well. So, and those are more informative maps in my estimation, because they have denominators involved as opposed to just the numerators, which are represented in the high injury constant. I'm not to say that you're wrong, Mary Liz. I'm just saying the other maps are better.
And this is a perennial issue, okay? This goes decades where somehow people think the metropolitan area is a rectangle. And it's not.
Member Foster and then Commissioner Karwoski.
I just have a definition question. What's a pedestrian crash?
Thank you. It's a crash between a driver and a pedestrian. We, by definition, our data set, a driver hits a person. Our data set only includes crashes that involve a motorist in motion on the public street network. So this isn't a pedestrian tripping and falling. It's not a bicyclist hitting a pedestrian. It's a driver hitting a pedestrian.
Okay. And then is a bike crash a driver hitting
Yes.
a biker?
By definition, solo bike crashes like a slip or a fall are typically excluded from this database. We occasionally do find some and filter them out, but they're
Those are the kind I have all the time.
And different states handle it differently. In Minnesota, by definition, the state crash database intends to exclude those bicyclist only or bike ped crashes that don't involve a motorist.
Okay.
So it's a shorthand. When I say a bike crash, it's a driver and a bicyclist. Motorcyclists do include solo motorcyclist crashes, but many of them also do involve a motorist.
Thank you.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you partly answered my question. The map is a vehicle hitting a pedestrian.
This is all modes as long as the vehicle's involved.
And then what year range is this?
2018 to 2022, 5 years.
Okay. There was a road I identified as having a few fatalities, but it's just post 2022. Great data, but 22 is almost 3 years ago now. So is there any reason where you couldn't capture data up through 23 or?
Yeah, at the time we started these analyses, 22 was hot off the press. Since we're using a 5-year look-back period, we typically recommend updating every 2 to 3 years, so you're getting about half your data new each time you rerun this analysis. And we've been working on the analysis for quite some time. So I believe 2023 is like newly available from MnDOT, but it was not available at the time we started the work.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Question, I don't know if I missed it, but are you starting to relook at these motorized bikes and scooters as a separate category? Because they can be considered a bicyclist, but some of them are going at high rates of speed, as are scooters. Were they factored in there in any way?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I know it's on everyone's mind. In the crash data, we have 8 categories of modal classification. If it looks like a bicycle, if the reporting officer thinks it's a bicycle, whether it's motorized or not, it's categorized as mode 6. There's also this category of other personal conveyance. That is kind of the catch-all for everything the reporting officer couldn't categorize. So it includes e-scooters, it includes rollerblades, it also includes people using wheelchairs and mobility scooters, and seriously, there is one narrative we found in there where the reporting officer mentioned an airplane. So it really is the whole spectrum, farm equipment, horses, everything. And we found we really cannot reliably tease out e-bikes, the motorized scooters that kind of straddle the line between bike and motorcycle, the rental e-scooters. They're all kind of mushed together in the data in a way that's not separable. And unfortunately, this is a common problem in every state that I've worked with their crash data. There have been some researchers who look at hospital data, but that's usually through a university system. They have special access. Like, it's really hard to get at this question.
Because I mean, I see that as a big issue with injuries as we move forward. I mean, one, I've seen scooters going down trails and hitting pedestrians. I mean, so somewhere I think that data needs to start being classified, because they might list them as another mode, but they're really, it's a motorized vehicle.
Right, well, that, in that particular example, that would not be a motor vehicle in transport, and it would not be on a public street. So that crash wouldn't end up in this database. When we're looking at this type of safety, we're typically looking just at the motorist-involved crashes. I understand it's a really
Well, what
big
about if
concern.
they're in a crosswalk, stuff like that? That's considered motor, that would be then,
If a driver hits a person on one of these things in a crosswalk, that would be in this database.
but not if they hit a pedestrian.
Correct. We do know from other research that that's a proportionally much smaller share of the deaths and serious injuries on our roadway. It's important. Every life on our network is important, but it's not the biggest contributor to deaths and serious injuries.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Lindy again.
Just, you say proportionally much smaller, just how much proportionally much smaller is it?
I have not finished my TRB paper reviews. I know there's some fresh research right now. It's smaller. I don't have an order of magnitude at my fingertips, but we know it's nothing like the carnage that we see from drivers.
Okay.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just curious, because we're putting in roundabouts in lots of places now, in Ramsey County, I'm sure everywhere, just to stop, fatalities and crashes and things. Have you been able to document that they're helping in some of those high-risk areas that we put a roundabout, or is it too early to make those?
Unfortunately, at this scale, when we look at the entire region all at once, the roadway and facility data that we have is not very detailed, it's very granular. So in this study, we were not able to look at roundabouts. I do know from the research at large that they really reduce the severity of interactions between motorists, but that's not something we were able to tease out in this work specifically.
Okay, thank you.
There was no link to that.
We had next. Member Sahijian.
I haven't looked.
You have your hand up? Okay. Member Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for Commissioner McGuire, I know in Scott County, they did some really good pre and post analysis of roundabouts, because they had some roundabouts that they put, you'd think they were in the kind of out on the farm fields, but it was really high conflict intersections that had significant fatalities and serious injuries, and they did before and after mapping, and it was significant. I mean, it was even just the levels of, of serious injuries and that type of thing, to see all of those coming down. But they've got some really good data, so I'll reach out to Lisa Fries and see if she can send some stuff on to you.
And who did you say has that data? The who?
Scott County.
Oh, Scott County, okay, great. Yeah, I think I can probably ask our own Public Works. We're putting them everywhere, and people are at first nervous about them, but once they use them, they love them, or most people like them. And so, yeah, we've got them in many of our really, really high traffic, busy sections. Cool, man.
It's great to hear.
The city that has tremendous data on roundabout safety and the reduction in fatalities is Carmel, Indiana, where they put in probably 150 roundabouts. And the reduction in fatalities is significant, and significantly below the average in Indiana. So if anybody's looking for data, I'm sure you can find it on their website. Member Anderson.
Thank you. You can also, I would imagine that Detroit Lakes, Minnesota might have that too. I've driven through there, and they, sorry, not Detroit Lakes, Thief River Falls. Anyways, I was curious about this. Thank you. Is the data normalized in any way in this per 1,000 miles driven on the roadway, or anything along that route?
This analysis is a concentration per mile, but it's not normalized by VMT or person trips or any other variable. We do have two analyses from now. We do have a crash rate that is normalized by VMT.
Okay, and then kind of along that same line, Do you have an analysis of like the land use or the adjacent land use to find out kind of how people are utilizing the space around the roadway? Was that part of the analysis?
Was that part of task 5? I mean, I know what it was in the PED study, but.
We used some of that information, so when we looked at the crash data specifically, looked at where they were in the context, so different urban, residential, commercial areas. So we have a little bit of that data by mode as well. So that was looked at.
Okay. And how does that show up? And maybe I can wait until further on into the presentation to.
Well, the work I'm presenting on does not have those variables in them. I can say, looking back to the pedestrian safety action plan, that transit stops and commercial land use and commercial destinations were important predictors for pedestrian safety. And so that has been implemented in some of the pedestrian safety metrics that the council has. And when we get to task 11 in this, we are looking at that pedestrian study as well. And so I can't speak to the bike and motorcyclist and motorist findings, but they will be brought into recommendations at the end of the study.
Thank you.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right. So this is our look at where crashes have happened. Let's start talking a bit more proactive. This next analysis is called the Crash Risk Index. This is a form of systemic analysis. We look at all the crashes that have happened, what are the roadway characteristics that are common among those crashes that have happened, and use that information to estimate risk on all the streets in the network. Basically, where do I have streets that look like streets where crashes have happened, even if these streets haven't had crashes themselves? There's a lot of overlap. A high crash risk index street oftentimes is also on the high injury streets, or it has some crash history, but not always. There are streets that are really fast. They have multiple lanes of travel, they have high motorist volumes, and they may not have had many crashes yet, but they still might be good candidates for proactive safety improvement because they look like a lot of other streets that have had safety problems. So there are 3 variables that really popped out in this systemic analysis. I already mentioned them. Average annual daily traffic, so motorist volumes. Number of lanes, those multi-lane arterials, they show up here, they show up in pretty much every safety study that I've seen, and the posted speed limit. Posted speed limit is an imperfect proxy for motorist travel speed. We didn't have access to that data for the entire region for every street in the network, but it's still a pretty good indicator. Are you going 30, are you going 50? Faster you're going, the worse the safety problem is. So this map is zoomed out a bit further.
Pause, please. Member Geisler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the risk index, I find it interesting, especially considering the previous slides where intermodal intersections isn't part of the index, given that we know that car versus bicycle, car versus pedestrian increases the likelihood of a severe outcome. How is that not factored in to identify, especially with like RBTN crossing and places where we know there will be intermodal intersections?
So I think I glossed over that too quickly in my presentation. With the high injury streets, we looked at each mode separately. And since high injury streets weren't done for the pedestrians, we did that for them too. So we identified high injury streets for drivers only, for the motorcyclist crashes, for bicyclist motorist crashes, and for pedestrian motorist crashes. And if a street meets the threshold for any one of those modes, we stack all of those together, and collectively, those are all our high injury streets. So we're not factoring in like the RBTN per se, but we are looking mode specifically where are concentrations of crashes happening. So we're not overlooking a place that had, for pedestrians, a high concentration of crashes just because the numbers are overall a little smaller than the drivers. In the crash risk index, we repeated this analysis separately for motor vehicles and for bicyclists. I believe motorcyclists and motorists were pooled for this one. The risk factors themselves are the same. The equations that compute that index are a little different and they're mode specific, but we see these same 3 variables coming up again and again for all modes. So we have separate overlays for motorists and bicyclists, but then again, we can squish those results together. Many of the facilities that have a high CRI for drivers also have a high CRI for bicyclists and vice versa.
So would it be fair to say, though, that you're using the pedestrian crash index rating as a proxy for where those modes are intersecting as a way? Because you wouldn't have a pedestrian crash without pedestrians being there in the first place.
Yes. This one did not include pedestrians because there was a separate pedestrian systemic analysis already done. I know that we keep pulling pedestrians in and out of this study because we've got that Ped Safety Action Plan a few years ago. But we have another analysis coming up next that does look at bicyclist volumes using a vendor data set. But in a crude sense, in the absence of volume data, you're right, where we do see crashes between motorists and people biking or walking. There have to be people there for those crashes to happen. And so an analysis like this is actually helpful because this does not require a crash history. This analysis can show us where you might have a facility that would be dangerous for bicyclists if bicyclists weren't so scared that they don't even bother biking there, or that they have choices to go somewhere else or use a different mode. That's the beauty of systemic analyses. You have places on your network that are so scary and dangerous that people outside the vehicle can't use them. So you don't see crashes there. If you only look where crashes have happened, you might think it's safe. That doesn't mean it's safe. This can help you find those and fix them proactively.
Your questions? Okay, go ahead.
All right. So this is what that map looks like. Again, I think we probably need to get you some county level zoom ins, and then at the end of the project there will be a live web map where you can really zoom in and click on a link and see what's going on. I will point out that
That's a quick question. This goes back to the map question that was asked you earlier by several of the commissioners. So when you were commissioned to do this work, did you do it for the entire MPO jurisdictional area?
yes, absolutely.
Okay, so you've got the data, it's just that you had it on a more compressed sort of basis here.
Yeah.
All right, okay. So you're going to get that for us so that everybody that represents a part of the jurisdiction of the Met Council will be able to see this data for their particular area of the metropolitan, of the 7-county metropolitan area. Ms. Schulberg?
Mr. Chair and members, if I can jump in just real quick. Just to kind of clarify this, so the analysis was done for the entire region, the entire MPO, right? So this is just kind of a snapshot that we're not giving you the live map right now because there's still some additional data that we were having technical review of with our partners. And so we're not ready to make the live online version available publicly yet. This is just a snapshot of it, and the web map version of it doesn't zoom out more fully than this. The data is there, it just doesn't show it on the screenshot of it. But so we can get you, the data is in the analysis, and so I apologize, it's just not clear from the slides, but it's in there, just not showing on the, because of the maximum zooming out of the web map.
And Mr. Chair, of course, the first thing I did when I saw these maps was try and look for the study or the base maps like I usually do to go look at the bigger one that would show the entire area. Of course, it's not up. My point is that if you're showing us a snapshot and the entirety isn't available, the snapshot should include the entire 7-county metro area.
That's a fair point, thank you. And I was checking the high injury streets on the web map earlier just to kind of spot check some of the areas. I know some of the areas, Apple Valley, Rosemount, there's like one road, I can't tell just from looking at if it's in Lakeville or just north of Lakeville, also Elko New Market. So we do have some streets in that area that are showing up that when we were able to give you kind of more of that full version, you'll see those.
Okay. For now. Okay for now. Go ahead.
We're looking at the CRI map. I want to bring up one question that we've gotten about these data previously. These results are based on the speed, the lanes, and the volume, and then the patterns we saw in crash history separately. They don't take into account things like bicycle facilities. So you can see pretty conspicuously on this map that Hiawatha Avenue pops out bright red for the CRI score. It has a really nice separated path. I dug into the crash data to see what exactly is going on. They're intersection crashes. So that is a big, busy arterial with a beautiful separated side path that protects bicyclists from some of the most deadly types of crashes, that motorist overtaking or coming up on you from behind or swerving into you. But the intersections are still popping out, and so the risk score is picking up on that. But since it is or will be a web map, that also means you can kind of overlay it with other layers. You can overlay where existing bike infrastructure is, or where planned projects are, or where your equity priority communities are to help contextualize these results. It's one measure among a suite of options.
Yes, Member Chowdhury.
Thank you. Is this on? Okay, I never know. as the problem child with this one. I'm really glad that you pointed out Hiawatha Avenue, and I just wanted to take a second maybe to share in this public forum some of the issues that my office has been dealing with around crash and safety. So oftentimes we see individuals trying to cross Hiawatha Avenue because the light rail station is right there. I've seen young children, people of all ages kind of just go right across, sometimes even crossing at intersections when it's not time to go, but primarily in between the intersection, because there isn't a crosswalk, there isn't an easy way to get over there. And then I think this is a little bit of working together between MnDOT and the city of Minneapolis, but due to copper wire theft, the lights on either sides of the sidewalks from about 32nd all the way down to 46, it's a huge stretch, have been out for months. And visibility in such a high traffic area at night for pedestrians and drivers looking at pedestrians is very, very little. So just wanted to say, like, that's a part of ensuring safety on this corridor, and then also just looking forward into thinking about how we can make it more of a pedestrian and bike-friendly corridor in relationship to the major transit stations that we have there, because it's an ongoing issue that we get a lot of complaints about, and we also get complaints about the timing of the different traffic lights.
Thank you for that.
Please, yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate hearing that, that detail. We're also working on a study about pedestrian safety in darkness, and many of the findings translate for bicyclists as well. We know lighting is a big issue, and having the lighting being out for a long time is a problem. Speed is also one of the biggest issues in darkness, even with street lighting. So, pulling out your high-speed streets can really help you identify where those are and build some resilience. So thank you so much for sharing that. Any other questions here before we move to the third analysis? I know I'm taking up too much time.
Oh, I think keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, we're spending a significant amount of time on this because it's important. A little bit more time than we anticipated, but nonetheless important. So thank you.
Let's go back to that. Thanks. Crash rate. Last analysis. I've heard you all mention a couple times. Here is where we normalize by the vehicle miles traveled using a standard FHWA formula. You don't have to memorize the formula or anything, but we're taking the crashes that have happened and dividing them by what we know about the volume on that roadway. There are going to be places that pop out on the map because they've just seen a lot of crashes, whatever the volume. And then there are going to be places that pop out on the map. Maybe they've only had a few crashes, a few severe crashes, but the volumes are actually disproportionately lower. And so that means the risk per person traveling there is higher. And these are two different important ways of looking at safety. Both are important. I'm not going to tell you one is like the true safety or another, but this is why we look at data in different ways, so we can layer on these different effects. So here's what this map looks like, and I think this one you see a bit more results popping out farther beyond the Minneapolis and St. Paul. Because again, when we normalize by lower volumes in more suburban and exurban and rural places, those crash numbers suddenly pop because you just don't need as many for them to really pop out. So it's an area of disproportionate risk that can be addressed systemically or reactively. So 3 layers of analysis. Any questions here? Or pass it back to you.
Go ahead.
All right. So now the question might be, what do we do with all of these levels? We have the high injury network or the high injury streets, the CRI, and then the crash rates map. And so that's where we get into the recommend corridors for further work, where we looked at the top of the, for all 3, and then identified specific lists for the region to put into and identify infrastructure improvements. So we identified 2 different priorities. One is reactive, so looking at the results of the high injury streets, and then the second priority is the proactive approach, looking at the results of the CRI and the crash rate, so those maps. And what we did is identified the top 25 locations, so those with the highest scores, those that are experiencing the highest existing crashes on the high injury streets, and developed a list of those. as well as for the proactive side, that priority 2 is the top 25 locations where the CRI and the crash rates maps, and those scores were the highest, to identify what are your top locations where you, as a region, need to address first. In addition, those county priority lists, so it was just another way for us to be able to provide another set of lists, another set of resources when you're going through and identifying potential different funding opportunities, and another resource as a map. So those counties lists look at all roads within the county, and then they look at the top 10 of proactive locations from the High Injury Network, or the High Injury Streets, I apologize. And then your second priority are the top 10 locations, again, at that proactive level, looking at the crash rates and the crash analysis, or the CRI. And so those are all, will be made available here at the end of the project. They're right now being reviewed. They're in the preliminary stages, where you'll have those 2 sets of lists for you to review, not only as in table format, but also looking at the maps themselves and where those locations reside in your region. Okay. And then, to kind of wrap this all up, we are also identifying potential countermeasures, so how to address. So once you have your top locations, it's those recommendations. So we specifically looked at infrastructure improvements. There are a toolbox. It'll be a spreadsheet database that looks at various themes, so looking at the highest, the intersection crashes, your run off the roads, those different themes that we saw throughout in our safety analysis, as well as those that are identified by FHWA's proven safety countermeasures. We also looked heavily at the safe systems hierarchy and those different countermeasures that are listed there to develop this giant toolbox. So as you're going through and looking at those corridors, looking at all those various maps, you're able to identify, okay, what are the potential infrastructure improvements that you can consider and move forward with. And within that table as well, you'll see there's effectiveness, so potential of how much you can see as a safety improvement, the general costs as well, and then resources. So if you do have people from the public and residents come up and say, well, how effective, or why, or what's the information, there'll be good resources that'll provide some just general support for you as well. Okay, and then I will go and hand back to Jessica as our one last slide.
All right, this is where we get to bring it all together. In our programmatic recommendations task, I don't have much of an update for you here because we're just wrapping up all of these analyses and figuring out how to bring them together and make recommendations that will move the region forward and work towards that 0 deaths and serious injuries. So we're considering for this not only the results that we've shown you today, the high injury streets, the crash risk index, the crash rates, we also have pedestrian safety action plan that you've previously completed. We know that there are safety goals in the TPP. We're looking at all of these bits of information to come up with recommendations that will carry the safety work forward and help implement it. So that's it. We're in the early stages, and in the near future, I hope to have more to share.
All right, thank you. Member Martinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have 3 things. I have a thank you, then I have an observation, and then I've got a request for some additional analysis. So thank you for this. This is exactly the kind of thing that we were looking for in prior years when we've been presented with counts of crashes, which are numerators, right? Obviously of interest, obviously of concern, but way not adequate to know what we should do. So thank you for this. I appreciate the data being brought to bear on it. Now the observation. So, and this is relevant to something that we voted on just earlier today. So in both the crash rate analysis map and the crash rate index map, if you look at it carefully, you'll see that there's a segment of Highway 47 that is indicated as a high-risk segment. It's exactly that segment that we just walked away from putting safety measures on. So that's just a little observation for MnDOT to think about how these data could be used to maybe inform different decisions about that segment going forward. Okay, now my request for some additional analysis. So this is for Ms. Bitson, I think, or at least you presented this on the crashes by functional class and the crashes by county. So in the crashes by county, you've denominated it or normalized it by population. And then in the functional class, you've denominated it by roadway miles traveled. I think that's via car roadway miles traveled, right, presumably?
It is by the roadway, so if there's two directions, it would be the direction, let's go back here.
It's center line miles,
Center line,
but for the
okay.
fact that some of the roadways are digitized as dual carriageways, divided roadways, it would be directional center line miles, roughly center line miles.
And in either
of
case,
facility.
it's car traffic, right?
It's roadway facility mileage, it's not number
Oh, I
of
see.
drivers.
Okay, all right. So regardless, though, what I would like to see in addition to what you've got here is an analysis. So the county analysis is hard to understand because the composition of roadways differs across the counties by functional status. Some of the counties probably have way more of certain types of those roadways than others. And so what I would really like to see is an analysis that adds a cross tabulation of the functional class by county that's normalized by roadway miles traveled, right? Because that would give you the cleanest picture of where there are, and like in what counties, what type of roadways might be the most problematic from that perspective. Thank you for the other measures, though. The index measure is great because it's systemic, and the crash rate analysis is very nice because it keeps your eye on the ball when you know you've got a numerator and denominator both in mind there. So, thank you.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good presentation. There's a lot of good data here. Almost way too much to handle properly in a meeting like this. So I'd really like to see you come back and do an analysis of some examples of how we had interpreted the data on a few key roads, and even bring in a county engineer, a city engineer to be part of that, walking us through how we would apply that to the change. I really think Commissioner Anderson made a good point about the land use. If you don't have that, that really attracts people to the dangerous situation. You really need to know what the development around that road is. But again, you're progressing on a lot of good stuff, but and you talk about tools in the tools box, I'd just like to see you come back and really show how we apply this data.
Thanks, ladies. Member Morass. Again, I'd like to echo the thank you for all the information. And as the first third of my career as a traffic engineer, it's gonna be fascinating when it's all said and done. A quick question for Renee, though, on the SS4A funding from representing the far west metro areas that are smaller. Do they need action plans to apply for that funding, or does a CIP or something like that suffice?
It has to be an action
Okay,
plan.
that's what I
Yep,
figured,
and it has to meet the 9 components that are identified in the plan. So there are some agencies that, like, at the county level, there's a lot of county road safety plans. They meet probably 6 or 7 of those, but they don't meet all 9. So there are some plans that are being updated now to include the engagement and equity pieces, which are usually the ones that are missing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Comments? Oh, Member Geisler.
Again, also, thank you again. You know, we're asking questions because we like to chew on this data and get into the context. So, you know, thank you very much for this. The question I had on the CRI, when it's leading to recommendations on the backside, you know, you brought up Hiawatha as a great example of where, in a way, the CRI is kind of like an inherent risk of a roadway. But then when you have a segregated bikeway, that's a mitigation of that inherent risk. To put it, I'm putting on my auditor hat now. And so when it comes to making those recommendations and kind of coming back to the early slides of saying low cost, high impact projects, is that where you're going to start with these as baselines and then kind of apply in, hey, there are significant mitigations along these roadways, and also they might be extremely expensive to remediate. So kind of adding in that layer of, I think we want to lower the safety or increase the safety in the region, lower incidents in as many places as possible, as cost effective as possible, because that's kind of like the initial plan. Or is it the initial plan just low cost, high impact types of things in the toolkit? Trying to understand how that relates to what intersections you're recommending.
Sure. Well, there'll be a variation of or different countermeasures that'll be recommended. So it'll go from low to high depending on what specifically you're wanting to address along that roadway. So it might be lighting with your low-cost countermeasures versus a separated bike path as well. We don't get as prescriptive, though, stating along this corridor, you should do X, Y, and Z. It's more so as that toolbox that you can look in, see how the different analyses shows up on that specific location, what are your different analyses looking at, or the themes that you're seeing, and then using the toolbox of saying, okay, XYZ is occurring here, and then these are potential, and it'll go and range from low cost to high cost, depending on, but typically it is try to first identify low cost proven safety countermeasures first, so like you said, you can address as many locations as possible.
And with the toolkit, is that gonna help highlight most likely scenarios that will remediate the issues here? Or is it just, these are options that might work there? Essentially like an intersection, right, adding a bridge over would remediate the most, right? That's very clear, but that a bridge over a place where you don't need it doesn't make sense. So always with toolkits, it's nice to have, but then helping them lead to this is really the best option for what you need to do.
So I'll say two things. First, the CRI is meant to be just that high-level screening tool. Right. It's not going to tell you what to build, and in fact, it may pick up on places where you very recently built something, and so the results are a little bit behind the times. But the toolkit itself, I believe, is organized by the types of crashes it can address. Like this is for intersection crashes, this is for pedestrian crossing, runoff road, and then it's also organized by the tiers in FHWA's recent publication on the Safe System Road Design Hierarchy. And this is based on a publication by a friend and former colleague of mine about the Safe System Pyramid. And so we know that when you separate road users in time and space and you reduce speeds, it's a lot more effective than sticking in a warning sign. So there are trade-offs. You can go with the cheapest of the cheap. It might not be very effective. Those other three tiers of improvements may help you move the needle more. And so that toolkit will be organized by these tiers so you can see, okay, well, this countermeasure separates my users in space. This countermeasure reduces speed. There are different ways to look at it. The toolkit, I believe, also will pull in crash modification factors and other summary data. But we know that there are a lot of highly effective countermeasures that don't have CMFs. And so being able to look at it by tier, how do these countermeasures work, that will help the more effective ones kind of rise to the top, and then you can weigh the costs and benefits.
Thank you.
Barbara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one question, and thank you for all this. This is very interesting. I did notice early on of the crashes by county per 100,000 residents. The highest per capita were Scott, Carver, and Anoka. And so I think it's really important as we're talking about these safety discussions that we make sure that we're looking at some of the outer roads as well. My question for you right now is with the crash rate index, you talk about speed, lanes, and traffic level, but do intersections and the actual design of the lanes, whether it's separated or anything, is that factored in anywhere? Because I know some of the roads, like we talked, Connie was talking about the opening of 212 and having 4 lanes all the way out is great, but there's still some very high-risk intersections. And so those are where the safety points are. So does that get factored into that index at all?
I believe that level of granularity does not, like divided or undivided, but we'd have to double check.
Okay, because that's what you see in further as you go further out. You know, those are the things that when we come back and we have projects for discussion, regional solicitation money, and trying to expand safety considerations for the whole region. These are the kinds. That's how the projects differ from the outer areas.
Yeah. And so that's one of the challenges. I think looking at these data at the regional scale is really powerful because the region works together, right? Like that's a really important feature. The data on roadway characteristics across the entire region is challenging to work with. So like we've got really great quality data on MnDOT facilities, and then certain cities will have it and certain cities won't, and then the compiling data from about 190 different agencies is just too far. So this is that first level, and then when you get to that reviewing an individual project, that's where you can wrestle with more of the details, maybe in light of the theory and best practice and the countermeasure toolkit.
I guess my worry is, and you're helping a lot with some of your explanations, is that some of these intersections in areas further out in the region won't get recognized on these maps because that kind of data isn't built in.
maybe I'm not following. It sounds like these intersections have multiple through lanes. Like
Sometimes
two or more
so- Yeah, like we're building an overpass, so out
Okay.
through Highway 212 is being expanded, but there's still an extraordinarily dangerous intersection there. It comes out of Baumgart's Creamery, so so very busy traffic area.
I'd have to look at the data
Yeah,
to-
you know,
to
and
see,
so
yeah.
like what I would not want is have all this data and then have something that filters something like that off of the map so that when we're looking at making funding decisions later down the road, we've made an assumption that that's, and I don't know, I know you're trying to pull from a lot of different places and I don't know how you get there, so.
Yeah, that's helpful feedback because we have to design something that's going to work in the face of imperfect data. We've also heard feedback, this screening is based on posted speed limit. We also know that a lot of agencies have gone and proactively lowered their speed limits to 25. They may not have had time to catch up the design to actually slow the drivers yet, so they might not pop out here either because they're signed at 25 but still operating at 35. So I think we'll have to figure out some sort of resiliency in the face of imperfect data.
All right, good. Ladies, thanks for being here from SRF, and keep up the good work. We need, this will be really vital to us in making some decisions in the future. We know from our MnDOT representative that we've killed 40 more people this year in a comparable time period, comparing it to last year. So it's not getting better out there, it's getting worse. And we're all determined to do something about it. We have the pleasure here for the rest of the time period. I guess you guys, I understand now why you laughed when I said I was going to get you out of here early today.
Never should say that.
Yeah. The old chair, he didn't know what he was talking about. Our colleague, our former colleague, Russ Stark is here. And it's always a pleasure to have him here with us and to see him in person. Aaron Kaiser and Joe Lauren, also one from the city of St. Paul, one from the city of Minneapolis, and then Paul Schroeder, who is with us from Our Car, who's the CEO of Our Car. And we worked with St. Paul and Our Car, for those of you that weren't on the tab, 3, 4, 5 years ago now, maybe, to fund a project in St. Paul that was a combination of their efforts. And then we've come back and done some further funding, I think, to try to make sure that has a good chance of success. And now we're going to get a report on this network that was set up. And Russ, I see you're going to talk about the power of partnership. And we can read into it what we want.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, great to have you here.
Great to be back. Thanks for having us. I served for about 7 years, and it's been a while, though. So good to see many of you and a bunch of new faces around the table as well. So again, Russ Stark, I'm the Chief Resilience Officer in Mayor Carter's office in St. Paul, where I lead the city's climate action sustainability work. And one piece of that has been this great project that's unfolded over the last several years that you all played a significant part in. Back in 2018, this body voted to invest in an ambitious project that was conceived by the cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis, our partners at Our Car, as well as Xcel Energy. And just recently, you approved a third round of funding into related programs, and we are excited to come and tell you how things have been going. As a longtime TAB member, I know sometimes, projects get funded, and then that's the last you hear about them sometimes. And so we feel like we've got some good news, and we wanted to come and share it. This program really is two pieces. It's the EV, and I'll say the letters EV as an electric vehicle spot network, which is our public charging network that crosses a section of both St. Paul and Minneapolis, as well as the EVIE, electric car share program operated by Our Car, but where the fleet is actually owned by the city of St. Paul. It's also 100% powered by renewable energy, thanks to a purchase from Xcel's Renewable Connect program. The city and our partners are really grateful for the investment that you've made here. The investments have been paying big dividends. Among other things, it's helped us leverage 2 additional U.S. Department of Energy grants that have helped fund the build out of this system over the last few years with continued expansion in the works. You will hear more about that soon. We appreciate these investments because they're making a meaningful impact in the lives of our residents, providing affordable, clean transportation for thousands of local residents while also making while also providing public charging for residents and visitors alike that makes EV ownership more practical. These programs are significantly reducing greenhouse gases and related emissions, thereby improving local air quality and mobility. We've been hearing from cities around the country almost from day one, wanting to really learn about how we pulled this off and how they might be able to replicate it. We did a few unique things here, and you'll hear more about them from some of the other presenters. One, previously, car share was really a service that cities permitted to happen within their bounds. In order to pull this project off, we had to kind of think differently and decide that car share was a meaningful service in our community. And that decision really kind of triggered this overall partnership. As public agencies, we recognize that if we really wanted affordable car share in particular, we'd have to find public resources to invest in it. This is particularly true when you think about how to provide affordable car share for our low and moderate income residents and in some of our lowest income neighborhoods that weren't well served with these services previously. A second innovation is that, as I mentioned, the city actually owns the car share fleet. As far as we know, we're the only ones in the country that are doing something like this. Technically, we lease those vehicles, but those payments do come from the city, and it's a significant chunk of what you all funded was the fleet. We also innovated in the area of public electric vehicle charging. Most places have struggled with the kind of classic chicken and egg question of people aren't going to provide public charging until enough residents own electric vehicles, and people aren't going to buy electric vehicles unless there's enough public charging for them to feel confident that they're going to be able to charge. That's particularly true in the urban context where majority of our residents are renters, and many of those don't have access to their own off-street charging, even if they wanted to. And so that combination of things also led us to figure out that with the car share service sitting alongside this public charging network, we had a built-in first customer as well in terms of the charging network itself. And that provided many benefits. Public charging is especially critical in these older communities, and as we move further into this realm of electric vehicles, there are unique issues in the urban context that are a little bit different from everywhere else. And I mentioned some of those. The cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul actually own the chargers that have been installed in our rights-of-way. That's also a different model than many communities have selected, where they're sort of bringing in an outside vendor to own and operate equipment in public facilities. We made the decision to do that because, first of all, the right-of-way is ours. We're not generally in the business of having other folks own stuff that's in our right-of-way. And second of all, we really wanted to have control over this operation. We set the rates that people are charged to charge. And those rates cover the cost of electricity and the maintenance of the system. I could go on, but I'm going to actually start handing this over to some of my colleagues here. And then I will come back at the end, both to wrap up and answer some questions that I'm sure you'll have. So first, I'm going to turn it over to Erin Kaiser, who runs the program at the City of St. Paul in our Public Works Department, to give you an overview. Next, you'll hear from Joe Lauren from Minneapolis Public Works, who'll tell you about the charging network and provide some metrics on how it's being used. Then you'll hear from Paul Schroeder from Our Car, as the chair mentioned, who will tell you about the car share program and how that's going. So thanks again for your attention and time today, and here's Erin.
Thank you, Mr. Stark.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm Erin Kaiser. As Russ said, I manage the program from the St. Paul side of things. I've been in my position for about 2 years. And Russ gave sort of a 10,000-foot view of sort of where we're at, where we came from, and I'm a visual person. So I wanted to give you a second to look sort of at where we're at now. This includes sort of what we consider to be phase one of our project, which will be completed by the end of this year. So that's our 70 charger sites across both cities and a fleet of about 170 vehicles. And so you can see like this really has been a super collaborative effort, yes, between the two cities, but also between, bodies such as yourself and other funders who have really come together to make a big project actually manageable in small pieces. So looking forward, thanks again to Russ's point about leveraging the funding that we've received from this organization. to gain some additional funding from the Department of Energy to do a pretty significant expansion on the east side of St. Paul. So we're looking to add another 10 chargers this year, and another 10 chargers this-ish year, and then another 10 chargers, about a year from then. So that will include an extension on the Gold Line, which we're really excited about, and I think Paul will chat more about sort of how that's different from our existing network. But wanted to give you a second to sort of look at what this looks like, where we're at now and where we're headed, and if there are any questions, I can take them. But if not, I'm going to hand it to Joe. Okay. Great.
Thank you, Erin. Hi, my name is Joe Lauren, Project Manager with City of Minneapolis. So here's a reminder of where is the network. The network is a portion of Minneapolis and a portion of St. Paul, not the entire cities, but about 35 square miles. The boundary here shown in orange is where the trip must end when you're done using that car share vehicle. Blue pins, obviously Minneapolis, and green pins, St. Paul. This map is a little bit outdated. The yellow pins were the ones that were in progress when we made this graphic, but we are now down to just 2 remaining sites for construction to be completed in Minneapolis and 2 remaining in St. Paul. So that would be 4 total remaining out of the 70 charging hubs of the entire project. Here's a little bit of information on how to use the car share network. So each charging hub has 2 chargers. One charger has 2 plugs for the car share network, and the other charger is the public charger for people who own privately owned EV vehicle. So a total of 4 plugs per EV hub location. So to use the car share program, you must apply for Our Car membership. To use the car share vehicles, trips must end within the EV spot network area shown on the previous graphic. There's a future trip incentive to return EV car share vehicle to a charging location. Charging sessions are activated by the tap of an Our Car RFID card, which just makes things simple and easy to use. The public charger, privately owned vehicles can use the blue chargers. Payment to charge can be processed by the charging app or charging station or use of the app. So a few pictures here. The top picture is where you can pay at the actual charger using a credit card. There's some information on the charger on how to pay, and that's the picture below, and then a screenshot. On the right is of the app. The charging app, which is one of the nice features, is you can look at the charging locations before you arrive to know if there are vehicles already charging or if there's an available charger, so you don't just show up and you're surprised. So it's a nice feature and convenient. So the charging sessions really are steadily growing for both cities. This graphic covers Minneapolis and St. Paul. The blue is the public chargers for the privately owned EVs, and the EVIE car share vehicles are the green data shown there. So it has steadily been growing over 2022 and 23. We'll report 2024 data at the end of 24. So towards the end of 2023, we were already registering about 2,700 charge sessions per month for the entire system. So here's a more in-depth, detailed snapshot of some 2024 data, which is very interesting. So this is just a section from Minneapolis from January of this year through June. But we are now, for the first time, starting in April of 2024, now seeing the charging sessions of the public, privately owned vehicles, now passing the EV car share sessions just barely, but really it's a pretty close balance. I think it's 53-47%. That started in April, and now it's holding pretty steady in May and June. I think July was very similar as well. So it's just a really well-balanced system, which was what the original goal was, is to build a system that car share users can use and the public can use for their own vehicles, and that the balance of the chargers and the vehicles is relatively equal. So I will now pass it on to Paul.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Schroeder, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members, also Mr. Mayor to me, since I live in Edina. Nice to be with you today. Before I get started, I thought that I should share what is perhaps the best kept secret of the Minnesota State Fair, which is that you can use EV to get to the fair. In fact, you can take an EV car share vehicle and park for free in the parking lot of the St. Paul campus of the University of Minnesota. And you'll be just steps away from the entrance to the State Fair. And if you want information on that, you can go to evcarshare.com/news, and you'll find a whole article there about it. But almost nobody knows about this except our members. That's a pro tip for everyone for today. I want to talk a little bit about EV and just the amazing journey that we've had starting back in 2018. As Chair Hoagland said, with the application to the Metropolitan Council, the Transportation Advisory Board, and everything that's happened since then. So EV, just to give you an overview, we originally thought that we'd have 150 vehicles. We have 170 vehicles. We actually got the vehicles for a little better deal than we thought we were going to be able to. This is a one-way car share service. One-way car sharing as opposed to round-trip car sharing just means that you can pick up a vehicle where it's convenient to you. You can drive it to your destination or as close as you can get to your destination where you can park in any legal 2-hour parking space, end your reservation and finish out the trip. It's sort of like the scooters for those that are familiar with the scooters, the difference being just don't drive them on the sidewalk and don't park them on the sidewalk. But other than that, the one-way aspect is very similar. It's supported, as we've already talked about, by this network of 70 charging stations, the EV Spot network, which includes both level 2 charging and also some DC fast chargers to help people get charged up quickly if they need that. And really, this is a system that, as we said from the beginning, that was built to support equity. So 50% of the 35 square mile service area is in areas that are either characterized by the fact that they're predominantly low income or they are highly racially diverse. About 90% of the service area is included in areas that the MPCA has identified as areas of concern for environmental justice, meaning that either a preponderance of residents are low income, a majority of residents are people of color, or 40% or more of residents are non-English speakers. So this is the service area. We've seen this once already, but this is the 35 square mile EV car share service area. This is kind of a Rorschach test. There's a real question as to what you see in this. I see a leaping schnauzer. If you look at, you see the ear in the upper left corner and the sort of the nose of the dog in the very far left part. But other people have seen different things in this. So here's our impact to date. So since our launch in February of 2022, and by the way, we were delayed on our launch, as some of you may remember, as a result of the Chevy Bolt recall, which hit just as we were about to start our pilot program in August of 2021. We ended up having to put the cars in storage for almost 6 months. But we launched in February 2022. So our car has grown from 2,200 members in 2022 to over 10,000 members currently. We've logged 280,000 trips on EV car share, 57,000 in 2022, 127,000 in 2023. We're actually over 100,000 year-to-date 2024. The data is just slightly stale. This was prepared in mid-July. And we're over 1 million miles just this year. We've logged over 2.7 million emission-free miles. Again, 0.6 million in 2022, 1.3 million last year. And we're just over 1 million year-to-date so far this year. My favorite statistic to quote is that that's more than 5 trips to the moon and back. Mayor Carter, when we launched this project, famously said that this was a moonshot. And we've actually been to the moon now 5 times and back. So we are more than a moonshot at this point. In 2023 alone, we estimate that EV has reduced 3,600 metric tons of greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide equivalent. 43% of total utilization came from Black, Indigenous, people of color, or non-white users, and 43% from very low income users. That's people earning less than 50% of area median income. And we estimate, based on published research, that the users of the service have saved $9.5 million in transportation costs. And this is really based on, going to the next slide, the way that people use car sharing to supplement other transportation modes. What we know from the published research is that people who use car sharing own fewer personally owned vehicles. They drop from two vehicles in a 2-member household to 1, or they go to being a 0-car household. So we know that people use this to commute to and from work, to get to medical appointments, to social gatherings, to travel outside the Twin Cities, to buy groceries and household goods, in some cases which they can't get in their own neighborhoods. We also know that 77% of respondents said that EV car share had made it possible for them to either sell a personally owned vehicle or to defer purchase of a vehicle, which is really how that transportation cost savings happens in households. And if you go again to evcarshare.com/news, you'll find that there are a number of stories, profiles that we did last year. And this is one profile. This is Alexis, who is a member, has been with us for a while. Alexis is the mother of 2 autistic children. She needs to get those kids to childcare every morning, and she needs to then get herself to work. And you can read the quote that's there. I won't read it out loud. But this is just an example of how this investment that this body made is really making an impact in the lives of people who struggle sometimes with transportation and with the cost of transportation. Cars cost a lot of money, $12,000 per AAA per year. The transportation cost savings of being able to live with less car in your life are enormous. And let me tell you just one quick story that I think goes to this phenomenal response that we've had. When we launched EV Car Share, we put one car in service as a pilot car in 2021 in the summer before the recall happened. And we just wanted to see how people would use it. We put it at the 4th Avenue ramp at the University of Minnesota, which is our partner. And it had a trickle charger, meaning that it was so-called level 1 charging, like basically just 110. So we put the vehicle in service on a Friday, and we were really hoping that whoever used it would be able to figure out the charging and wouldn't drive it too far and would be able to get it back. So we came back on Monday to find that the first reservation that had happened, somebody had taken the car and driven it to Duluth. And they had charged it twice. They figured out where to charge it. They came back. They had no problem with it. We were anticipating so many challenges. We were anticipating an enormous public education hurdle to be able to help people use these electric vehicles. And what we found was it was no issue. People got in those cars, they put their foot on the accelerator, and they drove. And it was just amazing to see what a non-issue the whole question of electric vehicles ended up being after all of the blood, sweat, and tears that we had put into preparing for this onslaught of questions and confusion. And it just didn't end up being that way at all. So we really chalk the success of the program up to a variety of things. Amazing partnerships. So we've had an incredible partnership with this body, with the 2 cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis. Xcel Energy, as was already mentioned, invested $4 million in this project initially, and then in another $750,000 in make-ready construction costs for the chargers. The American Lung Association, East Metro Strong, we've had so many partners on the way. Community engagement has been a huge part of what we do. We invest in community engagement as do our partners. Last year, we worked with 27 community partners. We were at 42 community events, including 5 multilingual events, 25 events in low-income communities. We spent 485 hours in the community just telling the story of what EV Car Share is and how these electric vehicles are accessible to the community. Our prices are about half of what other one-way car share services cost on average, if you look at the landscape in the U.S. And speaking of the landscape in the U.S., I want to go back to that 100,000 trips just this year. So it always sounds like a lot when you talk about raw numbers of trips, but let's talk about what that means. That's about 3 trips per vehicle per day. And what I can tell you is that all the published data that we've been able to find about other electric car share systems in the U.S. suggests that other car share systems are getting less than 1 trip per vehicle per day. And in some cases, they're getting 1 trip per vehicle every 2 to 3 days. So we are so pleased and just thrilled about the results that we've seen with EV to date.
Mr. Schroeder, Commissioner has a question for you.
Yes.
Commissioner Holbert.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So help me out a little bit, if you'll go back to the slide that has the pricing. What are the costs? How much of it is subsidized other than paying for the charging? I mean, what's the cost per mile or per ride, or how much of this is subsidized? How much is covered by contributions of the rider?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioner. So we have various rate structures, so rates are always a complicated question to answer. But in general, the rule of thumb would be to say it's about $10 an hour to use one of these vehicles. So we have the everyday plan, which is for just your average community member. We have student plans. We have the Access Plus, which is our low-income plan. The student plan and the low-income plan have subsidized rates, so they're a little bit lower than the everyday plan. We also have what's called the backup plan, which is you don't pay anything per month, but it's just much more expensive to drive on that plan. That's for very infrequent use. So we have a variety of plans. They are all different.
So do you have a graph or a information sheet on what the total cost of the program is, what you get in fares, what's subsidized by all of our partners, our federal, state dollars? I mean, all in, certainly there's what you charge the user, but I'm guessing it's not paying for itself. Given the millions of dollars you've taken to set this up.
Chair and Commissioner, yeah, that's fair to say. I don't have a slide to break that information out, but I can say that yes, this is subsidized by the investments that TAB and others have made. I mean, similar to the subsidies that go into public transit, to make those options available to all members of the community. So there certainly is subsidy. I apologize that I did not prepare a slide to break that out.
Mr. Chair, I'd just be interested
Sure.
in those if we as policymakers are looking at replicating this in other areas, and we're, aren't gonna have the same opportunities for subsidies, what are the costs of this? Would be important.
Sure, I think that's a real reasonable request, and I'm sure you can comply with that and get us the data, or Mr. Stark can, about that ROI, or what, the investment we made, investment the cities have made, so that we can make those determinations in the future as to how we want to invest the dollars that we're responsible for. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good.
Commissioner, were you finished? Commissioner
Yeah.
Holberg? Okay, all right, Commissioner Karwoski.
I'm representing Washington County on this board, but a good presentation by all you sharing pieces. We were happy that the city of St. Paul and Minneapolis decided to include the Gold Line in this. There's 3 stops. I think there's 10 stops along the entire Gold Line, so it doesn't directly have charging in Washington County. But we believe the success of the Gold Line or any bus rapid transit or any transit system is you'll get more riders if that. I think there's facts and evidence that people will not ride transit on a regular basis if that once a month or once a week they need to take a personal doctor visit or some other route. And so this is exciting. It's on 3 stops. We think the Gold Line is successful. If certain stations get improved, that improves the whole Gold Line. So we're hopeful that this product will show enough benefit that we can migrate it into some of our counties, especially along transit lines would be a good place to start. I think Russ might have a follow.
Thank you, Commissioner. Member Lindeke.
Oh, I just was curious about the question of subsidy. A good point of comparison for me anyway would be to look at this versus like early at the very beginning of the meeting, if you remember that long ago, the suburban transit providers dial-a-ride service, like how do those compare in terms of how much money and what they're charging and all that?
I've been curious about just a practical example of it. Like, let's say Commissioner McGuire standing on the corner of by the League of Minnesota Cities on University and Rice. She wants to take that car and go over to the North Loop in Minneapolis and have a drink with her friends. What does she do?
So the first thing you have to do is sign up. That because we don't use AI processes for that, we have human people who look at every application. It'll generally take you at least a business day, maybe a couple of business days to get signed up. We're going to review your driving record and make sure that you meet qualifications. We're going to review your selfie to make sure that you don't seem to be faking anything. So a day or two to sign up. What you'll do is you'll open up an app. You will look for the nearest available vehicle. You can open that vehicle with the app and drive to your destination, get out of the vehicle, close the vehicle with the app and end your trip. And, you know, maybe that's a 20-minute trip, a 30-minute trip, depending on when you go. So that's going to cost you, you know, maybe $5, depending on what rate plan you're on. And you'll be done with that. And we do recommend taking EV on the way to somewhere to get a drink and taking Uber or Lyft home.
I love it.
And then she drops the car and she goes to wherever she's meeting her friends on a social basis, drops the car.
Right.
And then when she comes back out and wants to go back to St. Paul again, same routine, just reverses that. That car may or may not be there.
Correct.
If she's not in the Uber or Lyft and she wants another car, she's got to find the next available car.
Okay.
If she wanted to keep that car the whole time, she could. She could just not end her trip.
Yeah.
So she could decide she's going to keep the car for a couple of hours, and just based on that approximately $10 an hour, that becomes a $20 trip instead of a $5 trip. But you have that option.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Russ.
Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Schroeder, go ahead. Or somebody else? Mayor.
So I have a question. I heard you talk a little bit about driving records. Well, when you rent a car, you have to have insurance. How does insurance factor into this program? And if people are hopping in and hopping out, how are you guaranteed they got insurance and stuff like that?
Thank you very much, Chair and Mr. Mayor. So our car carries insurance. It's one of our greatest expenses for this program. So we carry insurance on all of the vehicles. We carry a policy that meets Minnesota requirements, but also includes $1 million per incident to make sure that we cover liability for anything that happens.
How do you, then you scan a driver's license, you gotta have a license, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So in that example about the liability insurance, so now Commissioner's got the Mayor Winshuttle with her, and they're riding together, and she does a lousy job of driving, and he gets hurt. He's a passenger, and so he has the ability then to use our car insurance, or she's using our car insurance to cover her negligent conduct?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, yes, it does in fact cover occupants of the vehicle, as well as anyone who may be injured in other vehicles, pedestrians, et cetera. So the insurance is on a per incident basis.
Okay. All right, keep going, Mr. Schroeder.
I think that was the end of my part of the presentation. I'm going to hand it back to.
Commissioner doesn't want to take that trip.
I'm gonna defend myself here. No, I had those similar questions, but maybe you're gonna get to it, like, okay, where do we go from here then? I mean, I'm curious, as my colleagues have asked before with the cost analysis, how much are we subsidizing? What are the chances we can expand this? It's not going to my district either in Ramsey County, I can't get it to my house because I'm border that line that they don't go to. So just curious when we can get it to other parts of the area.
Mr. Chair and member, I'm sorry, McGuire.
McGuire, yeah, sorry. Can you read it?
Yeah, I can read it, thank you. I will say that the requests that we've made of the TAB up to this point have really been about the startup costs for the service to procure the vehicles and the charging stations. Our expectation is that for the operational costs, we're going to cover that through some combination of the program revenue from the vehicles, grants, sponsorships, and other subsidies from the community. So to be clear on at least one point, hopefully that is understood, is that those costs, those dollars, for example, the $4 million that the TAB contributed to start this up, those are for the vehicles, but we're covering the operational costs.
Yeah, and
repeat it.
Quick question. Do you have any trouble with vandalism? So when you do have a vehicle at a charging station, is it like 90% up or, able to charge 100%? Any kinds of those kinds of problems?
You're talking about the vandalism on the chargers?
Yes.
Yeah. On the chargers, we have unfortunately seen cables cut. I think that's been in the news. The sad reality is that the people doing this don't get a lot for the value of the copper in these cables, but they are very expensive to replace. And so it is a significant challenge in the area of public charging, period. What we've seen is sort of waves of cables cut and then they stop for a while. Our assumption is that the person who did that actually, sells the copper at some point and finds, that wasn't very worthwhile. And so you don't see any more for a while. And so we've actually kind of seen it slow down again recently, even though the streetlight copper theft, at least in St. Paul, is still very active. And so it's an issue. There's conversation in different parts of the country and the world about chargers where you would actually bring your own cable to charge, like the cable would be in the car. That technology is certainly possible as a sort of future way of dealing with that issue. For now, we have the infrastructure that we have, and the charger uptime has been really good, actually, of late. We had some initial challenges with the chargers, the buttons that you have to press to engage the chargers. We're getting jammed in the initial design. Those had to be replaced. And the cable replacements have taken some time as well. And it's taught us some lessons about where charging infrastructure should be placed as well. It's kind of think of it as kind of classic crime prevention through environmental design. You want these things to be in places that are visible, where people are less likely to mess with them as a general principle. Yeah.
Just, Member Vaughn had a question too.
Oh, well, yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say I'm a literal card-carrying member of our car. My family's car was totaled 3 years ago, and we now live car-free, and it's been absolutely an essential service, especially EV. And so I just offer, if anybody wants to pick my brain offline about kind of how it works and how it's helpful to, within the lived experience of people in the Twin Cities, I'd be happy to talk to folks.
That's great.
I do want to get back to, thank you, and I do want to get back to Commissioner McGuire's question as well about kind of expansion and where we go from here.
Where are you going? Yeah, so we can.
Oh, here we are, okay.
Yes, and so a couple of things. We do have the east side of St. Paul expansion that is, work is underway. That will include a new service at the Gold Line stations in St. Paul. When I say new, in terms of serving the Gold Line, we're thinking about a new service that is more the traditional car share. It's a two-way car share. So that vehicle lives at a spot next to the station. You have to return it to that spot, because otherwise, the value of sort of being able to extend people's transit trips with that car share trip isn't there if the car isn't there, right? And so the car, for the transit line projects, the car is going to need to live there and come back there. One of the challenges with thinking about how this service translates to a suburban context is that we really rely on on-street parking as well as on-street charging. And there's a lot of communities where that simply isn't possible or legal, right? There's also sort of the density of users question. But we do have this idea and vision that along all of the transit ways in the region, we could have electric car share hubs at those stations that are two-way. And we think of that as sort of an extender of transit. You get to the transit stop, you take the car to wherever your destination is, that kind of classic last mile or last couple of miles. In that case, maybe you're keeping it to go to an appointment for an hour or a couple of hours, and then you're bringing it back on the return part of the trip as a general concept. But it could also then serve folks who are maybe living close to that transit station as well, because of course we do tend to see a lot of residential development around transit stations. So we kind of see both of those opportunities, and that's the Washington County case will be our first kind of foray into the suburban context.
Commissioner.
Thank you. I'd love to hear that. I'm excited. You're right about the density. I would just say that, as you know, you can find like shopping areas, Roseville, the library in Roseville. There's certain areas where there's just a lot more density, and I'm sure you're looking at all of that, and that's just in my area, but every area has those areas that might be more dense. But I'm glad you're looking at all those areas along the transit lines, because I think those first and last miles are really important for using this service.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and I'm actually sorry that we lost Commissioner Holberg, perhaps, but The question about sort of cost and subsidy is a very good one, and I was actually going to close with a comment about that regardless, which is that when we first applied through the regional solicitation process to fund this program, we applied as a transit project, and we were told, you're not a transit project, this is a unique project, we'll go through that route. And famously, that became a whole new category, and you all know kind of the story since. I mentioned earlier that car share used to be a thing that we allowed to happen, and in order to actually make it a service designed in the way that we wanted to, we had to figure out as public agencies what we wanted it to look like, and then to figure out how to fund it. And so I would argue today that the service that we're now providing is a form of public transportation. And that we would like to continue to have that conversation about how this service fits into the regional program. Because obviously St. Paul is not going to develop car share service at transit stations in suburban Hennepin County, for example, right? And we've been leading this program to a large degree so far. And so figuring out how to partner, we very much want to do it. We think that this program can serve a lot of different people in a lot of different places, a little bit differently in the suburban context. And you can imagine sort of, particularly with some of our transitway investments coming, the Gold Line, for example. Somebody might be taking the Gold Line from Woodbury into downtown St. Paul. Then they've got access to the car share when they're here to move around within St. Paul if transit isn't going to serve that particular trip. And then vice versa. Someone living in downtown St. Paul, like I do, could go out to a medical appointment in Woodbury by taking the Gold Line most of the way and then finishing the trip to their actual clinic with the car share. There's a lot of different potentials.
Member Geisler.
Yeah, I was actually just going to make the point that this is the impetus for unique projects, and frankly, for less than half the cost of an interchange and less than the cost of some of the most expensive ped bridges we built, we've served 280,000 trips. So, I mean, when it comes to dollars per impact, this is actually like the most direct connection of what we spent and what we got. Like, this is very clear investment, and the fact that we did unique in projects to have quick investments on a shorter scale, not a 4-year scale, to adapt to needs and come back to it. This, to me, is the exact reason why we need the unique projects category to facilitate projects like this in the first place. And whether it's further EV expansion or whether it's other similar projects, I actually am the complete opposite side of I think this is a great bang for our buck, because we know that, freeways don't necessarily have an ROI on them. So I think this is a great example of how we can make impacts into communities and have a people-focused impact, which is what Imagine 2050 is asking of us to drive and do. So I thank you very much for envisioning this and driving it and coming back to us and continuing to submit to unique projects.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair and member. I'll just say collectively, including all of you on that, we have built the country's best and biggest electric car share program, and we're just getting started with what it can be.
You've got this primary service area that you showed us a map of. So if Commissioner McGuire becomes a card-carrying member, we're going to use her again now. And then she decides to drive to Duluth outside the service area. What's the consequence for her doing that? Or does it shut off like a golf cart hitting a natural area when you get too close to the boundary?
No,
it doesn't shut off, but you're on the clock. You can drive it as far away as you want to, but you're on the clock. So there's a pretty big discouragement for taking it for a couple of days, because on a daily basis, it's going to end up being more expensive than just renting a car. It's really meant to be used by the minute and by the hour. The traditional hour car service actually has built into it, the two-way service with gas vehicles had built into it this idea of a trip of a long weekend, say. So they actually have a daily rate that's a little bit more competitive. EV is really meant to be for those short trips. And so the rate structure is designed to keep it that way.
Good, yeah. Well, it was a fascinating update. Thanks. Thanks, Member Geisler, for your quick little analysis as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Too bad the commissioner wasn't here to hear it.
I know.
You can tell her next time.
She'll watch the
We'll send her the video.
Yeah.
It was you should take that.
All right, thanks, Russ.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for being here. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Paul. All right, well, wow. Yeah, I was off. Anybody got anything for the good of the order? Otherwise, we'll adjourn. Okay, we send,
Great to be back.
forget about the updates.
Jeez.
We're working, we're on a schedule, we'll let you know.
I will say, Mr. Chair, Impact is meeting, I wonder, is probably, Russ is going to be there. Impact is the old Revolution, so it's meeting in September.
Oh,
I don't know if we have
excellent.
another meeting, but that's biking and transit and biking, walking and transit conference. It's going to be in Philadelphia.
Okay.
It's a great conference.
Update.
And a bunch of us are going. Yeah. Yeah, you should go. Yeah,